Hello and welcome back to Fallout 3, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at the special stats in Fallout 3, and we're going to be ranking them here on our tier list. I did this for New Vegas, and it was requested to do it for Fallout 3 as well, and the stats are a little bit different. Now, we only got 7 of these to talk about, and picking these at the start is going to be one of the more important things that you do, mostly for the perks, though. Perks are really going to be the main thing that you want the special stats for, but we'll go over what each of them do. All of the special stats can be good depending on how many points you want to put in them. I would recommend that you specialize in something rather than being a generalist in everything. Being a generalist in everything kind of works in Fallout 3, honestly, because there isn't a whole lot of different perks that you can take, and if you were planning on taking the perk Intense Training, you could buff these up, so that does help, and if you're planning on going to Almost Perfect, then you can max out every single one of these stats, which makes them all really interesting for recommendations. So starting us off, we've got Strength. The amount of strength that you have determines how much melee weapons you actually have, which is obviously good if you're going with a melee build, but not as good if you're not planning on going with that. It also determines how much carry weight you have. So you have an initial amount of carry weight, and then every level of strength gives you 10 additional carry weight on top of that, and this also determines how much melee damage you do. Now, melee builds aren't the most common thing to take in Fallout 3. They're not really the most common to take in any of the Fallout games. They are very strong in Fallout 3, just like they are in all of the Fallout games, because you can rush to get certain melee weapons really early on. You can get a shish kebab, or at least the schematic for it, and then basically have a top tier melee weapon right there. If you plan on running to Operation Anchorage, you get access to Jigwee's shock sword. If you go to Mothership Zeta, you get the katana, so you do actually have quite a few good options here. This one only determines 3 perks in Fallout 3, and that is Little Leaguer, Iron Fist, and Strong Back. Little Leaguer doesn't matter at all. That one's just a point dump. It's one of the early level 2 skills, so it's whatever. Iron Fist is one of the best perks in the entire game, and it's really, really good on an unarmed build, although you only need 4 strength for it, which most players are probably going to go for around 4 strength, if nothing else. And then Strong Back is also very useful because that gives you 50 more carry weight. That one is useful, but you don't really need any more than 6 strength here, which means that once you have 6 strength, you don't really need to put any more into your build. And you don't actually even need to go that high because you are guaranteed either Ant Might or Ant Sight, assuming that you do those quest. So Strength is good, better on a melee build, good on an unarmed build, at least up to the 4 strength, and maybe some more. It's really good on a hoarding build too. If you like carrying around a whole bunch of stuff, then it's really good to have. If you want to put extra points into strength, go for it. It's kind of nice for carrying around more things, but you don't really need it because there isn't like a hardcore mode or a survival mode in Fallout 3 to where it would make other items way more, like ammo and stuff. Up next, we have Perception, and Perception is probably the most misunderstood special stat in Fallout because I have had multiple people claim all sorts of different things that Perception does, and most of the time it doesn't do any of those things that they're talking about. So what Perception actually does is it increases your explosive, lockpicking, and energy weapons skill. It governs 3 skills, which is pretty useful, so every level of Perception you get +2 to any of those, assuming that you're not already at 100. And then the other thing that Perception does is it determines the marker on your compass. So you can see red marks, this is enemies or potential enemies at a distance, and the more perception you have, the further away you can see them. That is everything that Perception does. I have heard people say that it governs crit chance. It does not. That's luck. Luck actually governs that. Perception has nothing to do with it. I've also heard that it increases your VATS hit chance. That's not true either. It doesn't do that at all. At least not in this game. In the older games, that's actually how it worked. Perception is just very, very misunderstood, and you really don't want to be buffing Perception up any more than what the perks are useful for. Even if you're going with an explosives or an energy weapon build, you can just pump those skills, and pumping something like Intelligence would be better if you want to up those faster. Perception for perks does have a couple good ones. One in particular, it has probably the best perk in the game, being Better Crits. Better Crits is insane in Fallout 3, because crits are insane in Fallout 3. So that perk alone kind of carries Perception to where you want to have either 5 or 6. So you could start out with 5, get Ant Sight, and go up to 6. That would allow you to get it, assuming that you got the luck. The other perks that this one governs are Infiltrator, which is a garbage perk, Light Step, which is kind of nice. It's a nice quality of life perk. That one costs 7, so it does actually cost a lot of Perception if you want to get that. And if you really hate bear traps or frag mines or something like that, I can understand getting it. Sniper's really good as well, but you kind of just need average to a little bit above average Perception for that. And then Thief, which Thief is garbage as well. You just don't need to take it. It's another one of those level 2 perks that's just for the stat dump. But if you're going to go with Sniper and Better Crits, you could argue that you should probably start out with at least 5 Perception, if not 6 Perception, assuming that you don't want to go with Ant's Might to get the strength, and you could go with Ant's Sight. So Perception, I'm going to put it in good. because of the perks that it has. Mostly those 2 perks in particular. Light Step is also a nice quality of life thing. Up next is Endurance, and Endurance actually governs quite a lot of stuff. It kind of does in all the Fallout games. So Endurance gives you a certain amount of HP, a certain amount of poison resist, radiation resist. It also dictates your big guns and your unarmed, and it also sort of dictates the amount of oxygen that you have whenever you're diving. Oxygen doesn't really matter that much because there's not really a whole lot of places to actually go underwater in Fallout 3 or really any of the Fallout games. Hit points are important. The more endurance you have, the tankier you are. That's always going to be good no matter what character build you're running. Poison resistance is sort of whatever. The only thing that can really poison you in Fallout 3 would be like the giant rad scorpions and the albino rad scorpions. Radiation doesn't really matter that much. Big guns is kind of cool, but there is a well-known glitch to get infinite big gun books, and it's pretty easy to do. It's not even really a glitch, it's just something that happens in the game, and all you have to do is wait 3 days to keep getting them. Unarmed is useful though. There's nothing really bad about pumping endurance, but you usually don't need to be maxing this out unless you're going with like a pacifist build, in which case you're probably going to max this and like charisma out, and that'll be about it, because you don't really need any of the other special stats. There are quite a few perks that actually are dictated by endurance, where you have like Lead Belly, which is pretty bad, Life Giver, which is pretty decent, Rad Resistance, which is okay, Size Matters, which is complete garbage, don't ever take that one, Solar Powered, which is pretty good, Strong Back, once again, which is really good, Toughness, which is really, really good, that's probably the best perk that this one governs, Rad Absorption and Rad Tolerance, which just aren't that great either. So the perks aren't anything crazy, and you don't need above like 6 Endurance to get any of the really good perks. Besides like Solar Powered, I think you need 8 for that one. That one is actually pretty decent, but this one's going to be like another good one to pump. If you want to get it up, go for it. It's going to be good no matter what build, so if you just have extra points, you don't know where to put them, throw them into Endurance, because at least you're going to get something from it. Then we've got Charisma, and Charisma is kind of at an all-time low in Fallout 3. It is pretty bad in this one. Charisma buffs up your barter and your speech checks. Barter really doesn't matter that much in Fallout 3. There's not a whole lot of things that you actually need to buy. It can be useful early on to be getting extra meds and extra bullets and potentially extra guns and armor to fix up your stuff, but later on it's just not that necessary, and if you kind of know where certain items are, or if you just have like high repair, you probably won't really need to be going with barter all that often. Speech is more useful, but every speech check in Fallout 3 is a percent-based speech check, so they're a little bit weird, and you could potentially just save scum them until you get it right if you would like. You can kind of just subvert charisma need just by that, or by extra things, like you could have clothing that gives you more speech, or you could also have various chems that give you more speech. For perks, this one also doesn't really have any perks that are way great. Animal Friend is probably its best, and that one is still not the greatest. Child at Heart is okay for certain dialogue. It's nice for getting into Little Lamplight early if you want to get either the Bottle Cap Mine Schematic or the Wazer Rifle there. Impartial Mediation is kind of a cool perk, but isn't really that good. Master Trader's not that good, and Scoundrel is really bad. So Charisma just doesn't really do a whole lot. It also kind of helps with companions, but not really, and perks and as well as levels are just going to help a lot more with that. So Charisma is going to go into mixed. Pretty much everybody that I know, or almost everybody I know, unless you're doing a pacifist run, is going to run like 1 to 2 Charisma. They're probably not going to have like above 4 Charisma, and that might just be to get Child at Heart early on so that they can rush the Little Lamplight quest. Then we have Intelligence, and Intelligence is fairly important in Fallout 3, more important if you don't have the Broken Steel DLC. Because if you don't have the Broken Steel DLC, you can't go all the way up to level 30. And that makes it so you have a limited amount of skill points to where you can still max out everything if you have high intelligence. But if you don't have high intelligence, then that probably isn't going to be possible. You could also argue that that's not necessary because no build really needs to be 100 in everything. You could just pick the skills that you do plan on using. Intelligence dictates medicine, repair, and science. All 3 of those are pretty good, although science, you can actually do an exploit in this too to get infinite amounts of big books of science. That one's less consistent than the Big Guns book because you have to keep going to a location where the ants are and then searching a body, and sometimes the body can fall through the floor, and that can make it so it's awkward. You can't really get the infinite books then. At least the big books are very consistent. But medicine and repair are really useful. Medicine just helps you heal up more. Repair is fantastic because it just makes it so you can keep all of your gear in high condition so you can do more damage or tank through more damage in the case of armor. Intelligence also determines how many skill points you get per level. So you get 1 skill point per level of luck plus the base 10. So you're guaranteed to at least get 11 points every single level, but all the way up to 20 points. You can actually even get higher than that. If you have educated, then you could go up to 23 max per level. That's really not necessary if you have broken steel, because you can go all the way up to level 30 then, and you could easily max out all of your skills to level 100. There's also about 25 books in total for leveling up. These each give 1 level unless you have comprehension, then they give 2 levels. If you have comprehension, you also don't need really high intelligence either, making it so intelligence is kind of in an awkward spot, because without the DLCs, I would probably say that it's great. With the DLCs, I'm probably going to say that it's good, just because you don't need to have more than like average to a little bit above average intelligence for most builds to be able to max out 100 and everything. And that's not even necessarily if you're going out of your way to find all the books, because if you're doing that, then like science and big guns are already 100 by default, so that shouldn't be that big of a deal. And then you have plus 25 to all of your other stats, as well as you probably start out with about 20-ish points to every single skill, so everything goes up to like 45, besides those 2 skills going up to 100, and then you've got all of your levels between 1 and 30 to actually max out everything. It becomes very doable to actually max out everything to 100 in Fallout 3. There are also quite a few perks, so this one dictates comprehension, which is really good, computer whiz, which is garbage, daddy's boy / girl, which is also pretty bad. It's a level 2 perk for just dumping points, educated, which is only kind of decent if you're on a low intelligence build and you don't want to be going for books. It can be better if you don't have the DLCs and you're limited to level 20. Entomologist, which is pretty good. Gun Nut, which is bad because it's the level 2 perk. Nerd Rage, which is actually pretty good too. You can be tankier. Swift Learning, which is a really bad perk because you're going to hit max level regardless. And then Warmonger, which is also a pretty bad perk just because you can get all of the schematics anyway. So most of its perks aren't really that great, with a couple exceptions that are really good. I think it just kind of fits here into the good category. Then we've got agility, and agility is pretty useful for most builds. So agility dictates how many action points you have for your VATS attacks, which is really good because VATS in Fallout 3 is incredibly strong, as well as this also dictates small guns and sneak, which is probably going to be the main combat source that most people are using. Sneak is also incredibly overpowered in Fallout 3 because a lot of the time you can just be bumping right into an enemy and they still can't find you if you have high enough sneak. This one also has quite a few good perks associated with it. So this one has Action Boy and Action Girl, which is a really good perk that gives you just more action points. Gun Nut, which is fine. We've already talked about that. It's a level 2 perk. Light Step, which is a nice quality of life perk. Silent Running, which is really good. Sniper, which is really good. Thief, which is bad. And then Nerves of Steel, which is also fairly bad. So it's got mostly sneak and action point skills associated with it. And those 2 things are really, really strong in Fallout 3. This one is another pretty good choice on really any build. The only exception to where agility might not be the best would simply be on like explosive builds, where VATS doesn't really affect them all that much and crits don't really help them all that much, but there's not a whole lot of explosives to actually be taking in Fallout 3. So once again, I think I'd actually put this into the good tier. And then we move on to the last special stat, which is luck. And luck is pretty crazy in Fallout 3. Luck actually determines all of your skills. The more luck you have, the more points you're going to get across the board. It doesn't affect them as much as any of the other skills though, whereas all the other skills will give +2 to any given stat. This will only give +1 to any given stat, but it does affect all stats, so that is pretty nice. As well as this also increases your crit chance. You get 1% crit chance per level of luck, so you can have between 1 and 10%. This can also stack with other luck modifiers in the game as well, like having Finesse, which will give you an additional 5%, and you could also have the Wasteland Survival Guide, which could give you 1, 2, or 3% more crit chance. And crit chance is really busted in Fallout 3. Crit chance makes it so weapons like shotguns just dominate absolutely everything, because if you can hit a crit, it counts for a crit on every pellet. And that's pretty crazy. You can deal tons of damage with this on almost any build. The only build that doesn't really like luck would be an explosives build, and that's just because they can't hit crits. Everything else loves luck, especially small guns, unarmed, and melee. They're all really good. Even big guns have some pretty good options for crits too. Like any of the Gatling lasers are really strong with this too. So you do have some really, really good options. The perks that it affects are also pretty good, like better crits being an amazing perk. Fortune Finder, which is kind of okay, especially for a first run. It gives you more money. Mysterious Stranger, which is also pretty good, assuming he doesn't break your game, which sometimes that does happen. And then Scrounger, which gives you more ammo, also kind of nice on a first run. So luck is going to be our first great skill, and kind of our only great skill. I would highly recommend you put a lot of points into luck, unless you're going with an explosives build or you're going with a build that's just not that crit oriented. But generally crits are like the strongest way you can build in Fallout 3. This is usually the order I would prioritize upping my special stats at the start of the game. Prioritizing luck so that I can get more crits, because generally, unless I'm going with an explosives build or like a pacifist build, crits are going to be fantastic. Intelligence is useful, but I only really want it up to the max that I need. Agility is useful to up to pretty much any point, so anything above 5 I would consider great. Same thing goes with endurance. Strength, just enough so that I can take something like strong back, so either 5 if I'm going with Ant's Might, or 6 if I'm going with Ant's Sight. Kind of the same thing with perception, just enough to get better crits, and that's about it. And then charisma is going to be my dump stat. It's going to be, 1. You don't need charisma in Fallout 3. That's not really that great. It doesn't affect a whole lot of things. Tell me your thoughts on this. How do you guys like building your character in Fallout 3? Maybe I'll do some builds for that, as well as like Fallout New Vegas and maybe Fallout 4 as well. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. Hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.